Bobby Beausoleil of the Manson Family, when he was in prison, he came out later to say that Gary Hinman was a drug dealer. Do you believe what Bobby has to say about Gary being a drug dealer? Because Bruce was once a friend of mine, and he got word of this, Gary being a drug dealer and all. I also wanted to keep you updated on this book I got going here, and it reminded me about Bruce because I got some pictures I drew of Bruce in my book here, and I thought, hey, let's talk about Bruce because I got so much information. I ain't putting it all in this book, so let's talk about some things that are really interesting that I'm not going to use anyway. And today it's Bruce. Bruce was involved in the killing of Gary Hinman and Shorty Shea, this guy here. A guy on Facebook made this. It's pretty cool, huh? This is Shorty Shea. Bruce always said about Shorty, he says, I cut him with a knife to let everybody know that I did something. He's been saying that forever. I don't believe that. I believe if everybody was there in a group and they were stabbing people, they probably did some stabbing. I don't know if Bruce actually killed anybody or not, but still, you know. I barely touched him with a knife. I don't think so, Bruce. And that's what he's always said. He's always said that about Shorty. About Gary, he really hadn't said too much. Until it came out where Gary was a drug dealer. When Tex would talk about Bruce, he said Bruce was always real loud. And he was always talking real loud, and he was just running around pretty much trying to be like Charlie. Trying to be like Charlie's a bad thing. Probably better to be like Charlie than to be like Tex, maybe. Another person who murdered Shorty Shea and also had involvement in the Hinman murders as well and was also handcuffed to Bruce Davis. He's been out for years. He's been playing music in Northern California, but Bruce still sits in jail. This was around 2010 when Bruce wrote these. He had found out at that point that Bobby was saying that Gary Hinman was a drug dealer, and it didn't make him too happy. My role and responsibility in my crimes. Every day for the last 40 years, I relived the crimes that put me here. The murders of Gary Hinman and Donald Shea. As my insight increased, so has outrage with myself for getting involved with Charles Manson and the chain of darkly murderous events of 1969. Why? How did I become so cold and wicked a person who was insensitive to senseless destruction? The answers were hidden in my own self-deception. Now I understand. A. I deceived myself by imagining I could feed my appetite for sex and drugs, which were controlled by Charles Manson, and minimize my legal jeopardy by avoiding personal participation in the cult's illegal activities. B. I deceived myself by imagining my driving the others to Gary Hinman's house was the minimum participation necessary to maintain Charles Manson's goodwill. After all, I rationalized I was not guilty of suggesting or planning the robbery. Therefore, in all our hearing, including 2008, I describe my role and influence in my crimes in the cult as minor. This was based on my self-deluded belief that I had indeed kept my role minor, unlike the others. Self-deception kept me from acknowledging my unqualified personal and moral responsibility or admitting to my full legal culpability. And for that reason, I also failed to assume my legal responsibility for the crimes of my co-defendants in the murders of Gary Hinman and Donald Shea. I also failed to acknowledge my personal moral responsibility for the cult's collective criminality. Thankfully, 4 incidents this year made me understand exactly why and how I came to believe and consistently describe my influence, participation, and my guilt in the murders of Gary Hinman and Donald Shea as minor. First, following the denial at 2008, I felt I had failed myself and everyone who supported me. I began to critically question myself about everything, starting with my basic perception and values. I asked myself, What was the board seeing that I was missing? I began examining my earliest memories, trying to analyze everything I could about myself. Too many have already paid too much for my crimes. They do not deserve to keep paying because I fail to admit all the truth about my part in the murders. My personal example as a willing participant in the crimes and in the cult surely encouraged others to follow Charles Manson. I'm sorry and ashamed I discounted the true impact of my actions to everyone, most especially to the Hinman and Shea families and all who still grieve because of my horrendous crimes. I'm sorry for who I was and what I did. I am now focused on compensating for the lives I have destroyed by promoting life enriching and violence preventing lifestyles at every opportunity. Signed, Bruce Davis, January the 12th, 2010. Thank you for your letter. It sounds as if Gary's family is still devastated because of the crimes I committed. My daily thoughts of Gary and my regrets for my part in his murder are in no way to be compared with the sorrow and loss of his family. They, and most of all Gary, are true and innocent victims of my vile behavior. I met Gary in the spring of 1968. He extended hospitality to me a few times in his home in Old Topanga Canyon. He was a kind and gentle man I knew as a music teacher and a member of a Buddhist prayer group. I remember Gary was looking forward to an appointment in the capability of social services. He would have made a significant beneficial impact on society had I not ended his future, potentially by betraying him to my criminal and self-centered desires. Gary being thought of as a drug dealer is a terrible insult to all who knew and loved him. You're right. I should have taken full personal responsibility and acknowledged my guilt for Gary's terror, suffering, and death long before I did. My delay was so wrong and unexcusable. I pray the feelings exposed in my role and responsibility in my crimes will illustrate and clarify now how I've come to open confession and admission to the terrible crimes I committed. I realize I have no idea of the suffering I've caused. I pray the Lord will give me growing appreciation of the pain and loss I am responsible for. I also pray that the Lord, by His Holy Spirit, will minister the comfort they deserve. Your initiative to write is so helpful. I have attempted through the LA District Attorney to apologize to Gary's family and friends over the years. Sincerely, Bruce Davis. I will answer any questions you may ask. So, what do you think? You think Gary was a drug dealer? I don't think Gary was a drug dealer. I think Bobby was being self-centered there, trying to get himself out of jail any way he could, which is pretty sad to actually accuse a dead person of being a drug dealer. What do you think? Maybe you think he was a drug dealer. I know a lot of people do, but I don't. I really don't. As you can see, Bruce don't either. So, until the next time we come across more information, we've got a lot of information in there, and a lot of it I'm like, wow, I forgot about this. Next time, we'll have more of that same information that I forgot about that I had. And did you know that Bruce changed his mind since 2008? If you didn't, now you do. And now you learned something new. Again, thanks. Appreciate it. Talk to you next time. Peace.